Hello, Modern Sages Soul Tribe. This podcast is really near and dear to my heart as I have Lark Dean Galley, who is being interviewed today. She is an amazing, amazing businesswoman. She's an amazing mom, a coach. She just does it all. She's so powerful. She really, in this podcast, we hone in upon her book that she has written that is called Learning to Breathe Again. Let me just read you a little bit about this. On March 21st, 2019, Lark experienced a devastating loss, an unexpected suicide of her 19-year-old son. Having already endured her father's suicide 5 years earlier, the second death hit especially hard. All expectations for the future were erased. Everything became difficult. Even breathing felt like a conscious decision. This is the story of her raw and painful journey through despair and grief. It is standing on the brink of an abyss, ready to pitch into the darkness and making the very difficult decision to step away from the edge. Lark shares how this decision to use her loss to bless the lives of others helped her to heal from both her son's and her father's suicide. It is her desire to still hope in those who wonder how or even if they can. This is a powerful podcast. She is a powerful woman. She has spent the last few years sharing and making this conversation of mental health and suicide such a powerful thing. She's in the space now of changing and transforming and wanting to really help women so that they can feel empowered and not take away from being a mom and their mental health, how they can have it all. And this is such a beautiful podcast about how she's been able to navigate the dark, how she's been able to continue on and have her son there with her in the process. So, Soul Tribe, I know you're going to love her just as much as I do. Please enjoy. Are you searching? Are you looking for something new, something different? Are you being called to your ancestral roots? The Modern Sages podcast is a tribe of women that believe in exploring beyond the broken constructs of society. We believe in empowering women to embrace the medicine within. All with an open mind, baby. I feel so blessed, Lark, to have you on the podcast. I know that the Soul Tribe is going to just love you as well. This week, I've been really looking at all of your content, your website, your videos, YouTube, like just all the things that you bring in and just such goodness.
Well,
and
thank you.
yeah, I love that you deal and talk a lot about navigating grief and as well as like death by suicide. And there's just so much in that area. So I just thought it would be so impactful having you on and to just share a little bit about your experience and how you've been able to navigate grief, not only with your son, as well as your father, as well as mental health that you have experienced throughout loved ones your whole life. So I think let's just dive in and get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim, because I feel like you were so instrumental in helping me on this journey. I really appreciate what you helped me like step into. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you so much. So Lark, for the Soul Tribe, do you want to give just a little brief background about who you are, where you've been in life? I know that's a loaded question, and you have a whole book that shares it, which we'll talk about too.
Awesome. So, I was mother of three. I was corporate, very busy, then stepped away and ran my own businesses, was an entrepreneur, and just was really in that A-type personality, got to be the best, got to achieve, got to do this, and this. And, my husband's military, we're very militant, as we raised our kids, and it was all like, you had to fit within a certain parameter, and the kids, you need to perform and you need to do this and this and this. And 4 years ago, when my 19-year-old son took his life, and we had no idea that he was struggling, everything changed for me. I did a 180. Like everything I thought was important before didn't matter. And suddenly I was struggling to find meaning in life, a reason to go on, just trying to sort all of this out. And how did this fit in the grand scheme of life? And it was hard times.
Yeah. I could, I can't even imagine. And I know that so many, especially when I do sessions with people, is everyone grieves differently. And I love too in your book, Learning to Breathe Again, how you even touched upon that about how you are grieving differently than your husband as well as your children. Like one of your daughters like didn't want to even like couldn't even go there and you're like, let's break it open and let's have purpose in these passings. And everyone's grief is so different. Um, and so I love the fact that you kind of have held space to honor that for others as well.
And at first, it was very frustrating to me because I felt like I was a little bit farther on the path of healing. And the reason for that was 5 years prior to my son's suicide, my father had taken his life as well. And so I had already dealt with a lot of this myself. And so I'm sort of wanting to push my family, like, hey, you can move through this, we can do this. And they're not having anything to do with it, right? And so I had to quickly understand that I have to honor them. I can't tell them how to grieve, how to get over it, so to speak, or how to move forward. And also, they couldn't tell me because, if it were up to a couple of my family members, I would never speak about the suicide. I would not have written a book, all of these things. And so I needed them to be as respectful of me as I needed to be of them.
Absolutely. I find that, in all of the stories in the world, like all the movies, stories, there's always this hero's journey. It's always you see this
It's our whole
person.
life.
Yes. And I have found so often that our greatest strengths are also where our greatest wounding occurs. And I'm really all about embracing the medicine within and stepping into
Yes,
that purpose that makes you feel alive inside. And a lot of times it's in those dark places. And we were talking about astrology just before our call, but even in that space, it's like where our wounded house is, or like where Chiron is kind of where we want to like hide away. But it's
yes,
also where our soul is like lighted and like lit on fire and its purpose and pride. And
but
so
it's hard.
it's so difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can
And
just see this being such a part of your journey and like speaking and public speaking and bringing in all of this awareness and having professionals on your side to also help with this. Oh my
absolutely.
gosh, it's so inspiring, Lark. Like, I just can't even tell you.
Well, what I feel is so ironic is that before my son died, like woo did not exist in my life. I feel like I'm very spiritual. I have a connection to God and in that way. But like this I'm going to call it woo woo. It did not occur to my logical brain that was a thing. And I will tell you what happened. My stepfather had introduced me to numerology years ago, and I had this big book and a printout. And the month before my son died, I was cleaning out my office and I found this big binder of all this numerology stuff and all these printouts. And I'm like, oh, please, I am so done with this. Let me tidy it up. Oh, but let me just read what it says about next month, March 2019. And I read about it and it said, your very foundations will be shaken. And I'm like, oh, that is so baloney because I have been
Oh
through
no.
hard things in my life. And there is nothing that could possibly affect me, and shake me because I've already like had massive trauma in my life. And then my son died. And I said, all right, there must be something to this. And that's when I began to open myself up because I was looking for answers in every place possible and saying, how does this death of my son make sense? And how do I go on? And it was through, various things like working with you and having the reconnection with my son and my father. That was one thing. And then checking into astrology and being like, maybe there is something to this. If the moon can affect the gravitational pull in the waters, and we're mostly water, then who am I to say that God didn't put the planets in a certain place that affects us in our lives, right?
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful to see how, if we open our mind and we open up the space to receive confirmation and guidance and connection to God and in all the different forms,
Mhm.
like, of course, if it feels aligned and we always have the gift of discernment if it's right or wrong for us. But I just think that's such a powerful experience that we have to look to different opportunities for confirmation and for
Exactly.
guidance.
And if,
Yeah,
in doing this research and you're finding different things that help you on your journey and help you to understand why Chiron and Saturn are in my 12th house of Pisces, and how this deep, deep emotional, spiritual wounding is also my gift to be able to help other people go through their woundings.
absolutely.
And I can see that how by my sharing my story and my son's story and the things that I have learned, it helps strengthen me. And
Yeah,
so I see it now. Didn't see it 4 years ago, but I see it now.
right. Yeah. So if I guess I would just love to hear your guidance on, if someone is really dealing with grief, or maybe it's even been a couple years since someone's passed and they just are having a really tough time moving forward or finding passion again. This is a loaded question, but what would be some of your guidance or some
You
of
know,
your tools?
what I try to tell someone is that you need to find a purpose that's bigger than the grief,
Mm,
because you know there have been times when I could just wallow and it seems so overwhelming. And there's also been times that because the grief was so overwhelming, I felt suicidal because I just was like, I don't even know how I'll be able to cope. So recognize that the grief is real, and that you're entitled to grieve, right? That's
yeah,
okay. You just need to be careful in how far you take that grief, and is it debilitating you, and to find tools. There are things out there that can help you like move forward if you're willing to like get out of the house. There's also, being very A-type personality. My thought in the past about other people dealing with issues, grief, problems, put your big girl pants on and just go do it. And going through my grief, I realized sometimes there are no big girl pants to put on. You're just trying to breathe and make it through the day. And when I talk to parents, especially mothers who have lost their children by suicide, that's what
mhm,
I tell them. I'm like, day at a time, day at a time. And in looking back, I realized that time doesn't heal the wounds, but it gives us perspective. And I look back 4 years ago, it's been just over 4 years since my son died. And I think, okay, how far I have come, the connection and the relationship I have with my son now, it still goes on. These relationships can still go on. The relationship I have with my son now is so much more beautiful than when he was alive on earth. And the connection I have to God and the connection I have to other people, would I really be willing to give all of that up, not to have to go through that experience? And that's a hard choice to make, because while I wouldn't want my son to have made that choice, the beauty that I've experienced is indescribable.
yeah. I love that. It's such a beautiful, beautiful concept, and that's the thing is, like, we come to this world to experience all of these
All
things,
the things, right?
and then it's like, we come here, we experience it, and then as we cross over, we take those lessons and those memories in this space of expansion and growth, and it just feels like there's so much power in navigating the grief and, like you said, finding something bigger than yourself to work towards, or to open up the space and have the courage to be able to do that is, oh, it's such a beautiful soul's journey. And it's like you wouldn't want to wish that, upon anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That's the trade-off, that I would say that our hardest times in life are actually our most beautiful blessing if we can find it, right? If we're
Yeah.
willing to look and see the good. I think the other
Yeah.
thing I wanted to bring up, I have cultivated this relationship with my son now. And just so
Yes.
everybody knows, I'm very clear in my book that my son and I argued every day of his life. He was a brilliant kid. And he, I think he felt like mom was put on this earth to torment him
Your
because
book had me laughing. Yeah,
I was a
sometimes
mom.
when
Yeah.
he's like making ice bombs and all these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
I know he was crazy. He would do explosions and just he created a flamethrower, and I'm just like, oh son, please, you know. Um, and and so I just feel like on the path since he passed away, I wanted so much to create that relationship. And at first, when he passed, all I could think of was that my son hates me. He hates me because I wasn't the mom that he wanted or needed. And I had 3 people in the first week that he passed away. They just came to me out of the blue and said, I have a message for you from your son. And I'm like, okay, I'm open. Every single one of them started out by saying, tell my mom that I love her.
Mm.
And my heart started to soften towards this boy who had frustrated me and made me so angry. And then over the course of the next few months, I connected with people, you, for example, and we were able to connect with my father and then also my son, and just had some beautiful experiences about all the love that they have for me, and that just I started opening up to this love. And then I started seeing my son in different places. We had this connection. We always talked about rainbows, at my mother-in-law's death and funeral, we saw a beautiful fire rainbow there. And so my son, we would always talk about rainbows, and my son sends me beautiful rainbows. And so there are different things that, if you can think of about your loved one that were, key things, look for them because they're there. My son drove a lime green Camaro. This is not a popular color. And I will see this lime green Camaro, for example, like when we're going on a family vacation, it will just pop up, show up in front of us, and just pull out and be there in different moments. And I'm like, I see you, son. I know you're with us. And
Yeah.
so if we're aware, and I'm going to call it faith, have the faith to like believe and expand that this is here. I've had I've had my son speak to me directly, not even through you. Once you kind of taught me how to open up to that, then I've had him answer some of my questions and just be with me. And I even had a physical manifestation like right before
Wow.
Christmas, as I'm putting out the Christmas decorations. And I'm like, okay, I know you're here, son, but that's a little freaky. You gotta stop.
Yeah. I love it, and I love that it can be in a sense of play. I
Mm-hmm.
think a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
times, yeah, I think a lot of
He's very
times,
much like that.
oh, totally. Yeah, a lot of times people are maybe get frustrated, like how come other people are having these messages, and how come people are having dreams and I'm not experiencing that? And I also like to say too that they're gonna come forward in ways that are also gonna be healthy for you. You being like, oh, that was too much for me. If you come up that way, he's gonna honor that. And it's like they show up for us in ways that our heart can handle, but also helps empower us to move forward.
And I want to say that to me, my son is very much a part of my life. He is still very present. I don't think of him as in the past. I say Christian is, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I use language where he's very alive to me. He's very present. And I think it's a choice that I've made. Other family members, they don't have these experiences. They don't even want to know about my experiences. It's too much for them. And that's why I say, if you are open to having this, you need to expand your mind and be willing to see it, because our loved ones are there and they want to connect with us.
Absolutely. And they want to help empower us too. I think in society, we're also taught if we're struggling, we have to struggle to receive heaven's assistance. And it's so far from that. It's like they want to come in family vacations with the green Camaro, right? Is they want to be there in those times of joy to also let us know that they're with us and they're in celebration of life. And of course, they're all going to go through their own healing curves on the other side. But that's such a beautiful aspect too that, regardless of what someone experiences here, they always have the space and the compassion and the support to learn and navigate the life paths and the life choices that they experienced here.
And you brought something up, and I just want to mention this. I have never felt that people who take their lives are damned. I just want to say that. But in some ways, I thought, oh, they've made choices that maybe this in some way affects their eternal progression. Let me say it that way. Okay. And
Mhm.
a couple of years ago, I was really struggling with that, really wallowing in, oh my goodness, I know I will see my son again, but has his choice to end his life, how has that affected him in the eternities, right? And my son came very clearly, his voice came very clearly into my mind,
Yeah.
very strong. And he said, Mom, this did not affect my eternal progression. And I know
Wow.
it wasn't me because I had never had that thought before. I never understood that, right? And I thought, who am I to put parameters on God, right?
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants. And so this whole idea that just because someone has taken their life, they're less than in some way, that is not true. And I want people who are struggling with that, or people who have lost someone, to know that their loved one was not in their right mind, right? And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
to not worry about like this big judgment, that they're progressing, and just feel love for them
Yeah.
and feel the love they have for you.
Absolutely. And it's almost as if too, like we come into this world and there's so much density. I mean, just think about our body. Like our spirit ultimately is like, I don't know, I like to think of it as like just this, I don't know, like this holographic light. Like it can be stretched and long and it
Uh-huh.
can be small if you want it. But like when we step into this body, it's like I like to say like kind of this dense meat suit. And it's like navigating and forgetting. And then it's like coming back into that space and reviewing our life and seeing, okay, these are things I experienced, but like, hey, I'm still this infinite being, which
Exactly.
brings in such a higher sense of like, wow,
Right. It's a higher sense of purpose, and
yeah,
to realize that this life, this earth time is so small. And I always have to remind myself that when the grief gets hard, I was like, this is just a moment. It will be okay.
yes, absolutely. And I love to, I wanted to touch upon having the faith to receive signs or
Yes.
confirmations of our loved ones as well as if we're not believing or if we're questioning, it holds us back from being able to experience because so many times we're like, "Oh, I have to have these big earth-shattering experiences to know that they're there." And then you have like the skeptics that are like, "Well, if you're looking for a sign, then of course you're going to find them." But at the same time, like that's with anything in life. And
Right.
and how can we welcome the magic and the healing into our space? And that really is through having faith that they're gonna show up for us and be there in those ways. And even if you're not feeling like, "Oh, I'm having these promptings or these confirmations as much as I would like to," well, maybe it's time to ask for some more, to set up some more playful ways of connection. That is just like, "Hey, I have the faith for this. Let's go and see how many other miracles can unfold." But it's almost like when you can expect that or you put the positive intention to do that, then things can come forward a lot more often as
And
well.
also, I will invite my son to be with me, if I'm speaking at a suicide prevention event or mental health or something like that, or I'm going through a tough time. I might ask him to be with me, or I've also learned to ask angels to be with me, uh, going throughout my day as I'm getting ready to talk with you. I'm just asking for
Mhm.
angels to be with me, especially like when I talk about suicide prevention, I believe that my son is with me because he is so passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there are so many possibilities if we're willing to open our mind to what's
Yeah.
going on.
I love it, and even that's funny too, because before I got on, I'm like, "Okay, Christian, just guide the conversation. We're both showing up. We're here. We're wanting to honor you." Literally, I was, like, saying that before we hopped on, so I love that you're, like, calling on the angels even before we meet.
Yes.
It's when we can allow them to be part of creating in the world, like any relationship and friendship is like, hey, when you can invite them in, they're going to feel more connected and then you're going to feel a stronger sense of purpose. The other thing I wanted to hit on is in your book, I honestly found it so refreshing too, your honest conversations about your relationship with Christian and how that was for you and how you tried to do all the things that you could. And I think that especially, when I work with people who are navigating grief from suicide and even someone who passed really suddenly and didn't receive like they had a lot of closure, is it's easy to kind of like have those thoughts like, oh, it was my fault. What could I have done? All these different things. And I love how you touch upon that because so many people don't even want to like admit that they feel that way or like admit that they might be like, "Oh, I didn't do what I could." And I love how in the process of your book, you're explaining all these things and you're also showing up to say, "Hey, like, if I were to go back, I might do things different, but at the same time, those lessons brought me to where I'm at now so that I can be a voice for other parents or other spouses who might be struggling in this space so that maybe the outcome is different." Like, it was so refreshing and, like, I was like, "This girl's got so much freaking guts because not many people acknowledge that."
Yeah, you know what? That book was just like a raw, open wound to my heart. Um, it wasn't a superficial look at grief. It was we're gonna walk through this and we're gonna find a way to heal. And it was
Yes.
very raw. And I wanted people to understand, life was not like rainbows and unicorns with growing up with my son. He was a pistol. He was
Yeah.
difficult. He was a difficult child for me, and yet, looking back, would I have done things differently? Could I have done something? And I think we do the very best we can with what we know. and
Yes.
and I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And now, after my son's death, I parent differently, and this is something that hopefully comes across in the book, that my number one lesson I've learned through this is like the secret to life is love. It really is. It's just love. To love everyone around us, and especially to love our children. And we're not here to judge them or to force them. We're here to love and guide them. And they're going to make choices that we probably would not want for them. They're going to have consequences and outcomes. But if we can be their greatest advocate and we can stand where they know no matter what they do, they can show up in who they are and know that we will love them, then we've done our job as a parent, because that's all it's about, is just to love them.
Absolutely. And that takes away the expectation of how someone needs to be shown up or how we expect someone or how they can expect themselves as well.
I mean, think about it. If we have any expectation for like a child or a friend, a spouse, that they better do XYZ and then we'll love them. Or if we show extra love for our favorite child because they're showing up with A's or they've done the things that we want and expect, then that puts conditions on our love. That's not real love, right?
Right.
And if we can just love without condition, love no matter what they choose, that's love. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of layers in ourselves to get to that point.
Right. And that's part of the journey,
Yeah.
we have these things show up for us to release layers and that's also the thing navigating with grief as well is there's always going to be it's
More.
like a spiral. Yeah, it's like a spiral as you might think, "Oh, I've overcome that." But
Yes.
it's like as we get closer in it might or as we get farther out, it might not be as often
Right.
or as intense, but that's still part of it is the shedding of layers, and that's such a thing with grief too, where it's like, "Oh, I've been really doing really good," and then one day it's just like, poof, like a
Yes.
dumpster fire, and you're like,
you,
"Why?"
I think that time allows for those down times to be farther apart, but they still come. The regret or the sadness, or what would he have been doing right now? 4 years later, he would be graduated from college. He would be doing this or
Right.
this. you know, and this grief that might come in for the what if, and just say, oh yes, I remember this. uh, I'm okay, I can make it through. I just need to maybe be a little bit more sensitive to myself today,
Yes.
and know that it will be okay.
Modern Sage Tribe, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I wanted to take just a quick minute to tell you about an amazing opportunity happening in June. In June, I'm going to be hosting a class that's all about how to deepen your connection to the ancestral realm. So, this is going to be 2 in person ceremonies. We'll be doing a fire ceremony as well as a cacao and water ceremony. And then we'll be having weekly calls, and you'll have an online portal for classes and videos to take in between our times meeting together to really help you deepen your connection to the ancestral realm. If this calls to you, please click the link in the show notes so that you can sign up and be a part of this amazing opportunity in the month of June in 2023. Yes, I keep seeing this image. I was speaking to someone at an event, and he was navigating his husband's passing, and he showed me this picture, which I wish that I had it, but it was like a grave and it was in a mason jar. And it says, like, everyone says that time heals. And then underneath it, it was like this big giant green circle in this mason jar that like's like just overpowering. And then it said, what really happens is you gain perspective and the jar gets bigger. So instead of it being like, "Oh, it's gonna go away," it's like you can learn to navigate and like you said, have a greater purpose than the grief. It's like getting a different jar so there's more opportunity in that space, which I thought was like pure gold. I'm like, "Oh, that's amazing."
Yes. And that's really the way it is if you want to learn to cope in your grief. You know, when my son first passed away, I was looking on Facebook for different groups, you know, parents who've lost children and specifically to suicide. And I noticed very quickly that there were many parents who were still caught up in the moment. 3 years later, they still had their child's backpack exactly on the stairs where they left it, you know, and they just stayed in the moment. And I'm like, oh no, I am not going to do that. I am not going to stay in this moment of so much grief and sadness. I cannot do that. And that doesn't mean that I'm not sad, that I don't have grief, but I still feel my son so close to me, and his joy when I have joy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the greatest and best ways to honor our loved ones,
Mhm.
to honor Christian and your father. It's like, as you find joy, it gives them no greater joy than to experience that and be a part of that passion and that purpose with you. It's so beautiful, and in my mind, I can just even imagine, like, as you're on those stages speaking and talking, like, it's almost like I can see them with you, like, standing by you, also sharing their voice through you is like,
Yes.
this needs to be aware and known and spoken of and not have it be such a hidden subject.
Exactly. You
'Cause
know, and I've had several friends who have the ability to like see spirits and to see see different things. And when I start talking about suicide prevention and they're in the room, they're like, "Oh my gosh, your son showed up and he brought like 50 friends and they're like standing behind you, and he is so proud of you for what
Yeah.
you are sharing." And I just feel that love from him.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So many good points. Thank you so much. I know, or do you still have that grief? I know you were doing a class and a course about that. Is that still something that you're working with?
Not so much. Do you know what? This is interesting because I felt like, you know, that my mission in life after my son died was to talk about suicide prevention and to be really active in that community. And for 4 years, I was very active in that community. And then last fall in September, you know, September Suicide Awareness Month, and I
Yeah.
spoke at the University of Utah, which was my son's school. I spoke at his former high school. I spoke at my daughter's former high school, which obviously was triggering because the the that high school where my daughter went was where I went to tell her about her brother's death, right? And then I was speaking at a couple other schools, and I've been doing this, you know, with the thought of of helping these kids, right? And yet it takes a lot of emotional toll on me.
Yeah, right.
And it was during this time, shortly thereafter, when I'm just like trying to get my emotional energy back, that my son Christian came and said to me, Mom, I see what you're doing, and I know that you're trying to do good, but I also know that it's really difficult for you, and it's putting you in
Mm,
an emotional state that's very difficult for you.
yeah.
And I said, well, yes, that's true, but it's kind of like my cross to bear, like I'm going to carry this and do whatever I have to because I want to make it right for you. And he was like, no, Mom, that's not the way it works. And he goes, the people that you need to help aren't even in the room. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm helping middle schoolers, I'm helping high schoolers, college students, parents, I'm helping people who are grieving, right? And I'm like trying to help everybody. And he's like, no, Mom, he said, before I took my life, my problem started 5 years before this happened. He goes, you need to talk to parents of young children so that they can help their children before they even start to go down this dark road. And I'm like, great. I have no idea what that looks like. I'm like, now you just like switched my direction, right?
Yeah.
So for during this last winter, I kind of was in hibernation thinking, what does this mean? I still help out. People want me to talk about, my thoughts. I have a presentation on the suicide prevention, but I do it in a way that's it's uplifting and age appropriate.
Yeah.
And I still help out with events. But just recently I've been thinking, okay, what is this new direction my son wants me to go in? And in looking at my human design and my astrological charts, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, here we go with the woo. I was put on this planet to help people navigate their own lives, to help them find ways through the difficult times, as well as to simplify their lives. And so I am starting a new program specifically with high achieving women who don't want to sacrifice their family or their mental health. And that's sort of where I was back, in
Wow.
the corporate world with young kids and trying to keep it all together and spinning out of control, right? And looking back, I think, these are lessons I wish I had understood better when my kids were younger, and they would have been at a better place for
Mm,
me to impact them.
that's
And so I'm like,
beautiful.
this is a totally different direction, but I feel that energetically it feels
Good. I love that. I love also that you use the winter and hibernation
good. There was a lot of
to
hibernation.
yeah, especially this winter, to, like, go within and to regroup, and I also love that, he's there to show you, like, "Okay, mom, I know you wanna live for me, and I know you wanna do these things, but it's also so important to notice your emotions and your mental health and how that is showing up for you and empowering you in those ways," I think is, like, so beautiful to
I
even
just feel like
acknowledge that.
he cares so much for me. He loves me so much. And I'm like, oh, son.
Yeah, that is so good. I'm excited to see how, all of that comes along with you, and I also think it's really cool too that you've been sharing so much about your fitness journey and how you've been really able to accomplish big goals and how it's been a lot of fun, and I think that physically, that's also such a great part to our mental health that a lot of times we forget, or especially when someone is navigating in grief. It's like, how can you push your body or how can you push yourself? And when we are in the best capacity in our own body, we're able to like hone in and have more power in what we want to create in life. So every
Exactly.
time I'm like, oh, I gotta get to the gym today. You're such a good reminder of that.
Because it's been about a year and a half ago that I actually hired a trainer, because I was tired of being mediocre, and I feel like I pushed myself, but I have to say that after I hired a trainer, I realized that I didn't really push myself. So through this whole journey of my life, I've realized that coaches and healers have played such a huge part of where I am today, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and with that mental health. I couldn't have done it on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all of that. My last thing I want to touch upon is your audiobook. I'm a big audio girl, and I loved also that you had the breaks and it was so unique. I've never experienced that before. Um, with having Dr. Paul Jenkins, is that
Uh-huh.
correct?
Yep.
Who you guys, after each chapter, you talked about different aspects of mental health and lessons learned, and almost like helps see that how you coped versus how they were coping was a help, like was both healthy the way that it was for those certain circumstances.
It's so interesting because my book came out, about a year and a half after my son died. So it was in the fall of 2020. And then, I had no intention of this. My whole journey has been no intention at all about specific. I wasn't going to write a book. And then, God said, yes, you are. And I'm like,
There
oh.
it is.
And then I wasn't going to put it on an Audible. And then like, yes, you are. And so I thought about that. How can I do this to make it more impactful, right? Rather than just me narrating it. A good friend, Dr. Paul Jenkins, who's a clinical psychologist, and he's fun. He's very upbeat. He deals with hard topics, and yet he can approach them in a very positive way. And I like that. And I thought, well, he was willing to come on. And after, each chapter, like you said, we talked about, the mental illness of my father. He was undiagnosed bipolar. And I'm growing up in this very unstable environment. And how do I cope? How did that affect me in my parenting, which affected my son, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like I was getting this deep dive session. It was very helpful for me, but also, like you said, I think it helps put a different perspective and a professional perspective on what I was experiencing. So you've got the personal experience, and then you've got the clinical psychologist who's going, okay, well, let's break this down.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. It was so perfect. Okay, I know we're closing up on our time. I just wanted to see, like, for those who were really called to learning more about you and seeing what you're all about, where is the best way and to get in to just get a hold of you and all the
Sure.
things?
So I have a website. It's larkdeangalley.com. It's shifting. So I am in the process of shifting everything I do. So isn't that so much fun? Uh,
Yes.
so,
I feel you. I'm in that same space. I'm like, there's new things coming in, and
yep.
it's also just like going with the flow, but also that's how life should be. You
Right.
watch a child grow and there's phases and it's like, oh, there's all these things stepping in, and then
Yes.
as adults we just think that we don't have like progression is like cut off from us. It's like, no.
Well, there's so many things.
Continuation.
If people want to find my book, they can find it on Amazon. It's Learning to Breathe Again, Choosing to Heal After Losing a Loved One to Suicide. The book is great, but the Audible, like you said, it's so much more impactful. So
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I will have all of those in the show notes as well for those who want to connect with you, as well as on like Facebook, because you also have just really great stuff to also see what's in the next store for you rolling out all the new things, and I love it all.
thank you.
Yeah, is there anything else that you want to touch on that we haven't touched upon?
You know what? Just have the faith to know that what you're feeling right now, whatever it is, it's the right thing. And just have the strength to take steps to move forward so that you can feel better. You can find joy. You can laugh again. You can find happiness. You were not meant to be stuck in all of that. And while it might be hard, it actually is a choice. You have to make that choice to say, I am going to find healing. I can find healing. I don't have to be stuck in this spot.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. And I know that the Soul Tribe is just going to love you and eat up all that you have to offer. So thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this beautiful podcast. If you are inspired to connect in or to just get in touch or to watch the new growth and the changes that Lark is going through, all of her information is in the show notes below. Thank you, Soul Tribe, so much. Once again, if you have not looked into or signed up for how to deepen your roots to the ancestral realm, I would strongly encourage you to look into that, as that will be showing up and coming forth in June of 2023. Thanks. called to connect to your medicine within? Have you wanted to strengthen your spiritual gifts? Are you looking for ways to incorporate the sacred into your everyday life? Maybe do you want to have like-minded friends in a tribe who can connect with you? Modern Sage's Soul Tribe is dedicated to spiritual seekers like yourself who are embracing the medicine within. Now, in this tribe, we are going to be doing moon gatherings, amazing spiritual gift giveaways, connecting to a soul tribe, as well as hosting mystery school classes. If you are feeling called to connect to the soul tribe, I will leave a link for you in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to Modern Sages Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us online. Blessings.